viewers. Today we're looking at chapter 4 of social justice and food security, agriculture and food security, a responsibility for climate change and sustainable development. Okay, those are pretty scientific words, and I think Elliot is going to try and explain those before we go any further. But before we do that, Elliot, do you want to talk about chapters 1 to 3, just give a brief summary of what we've talked about? It's your book. You wrote it soon after finishing your studies in, what country was that? Holland?
Sweden.
Sweden. So soon after you completed some studies in Sweden, you came up with this book. And I think it's an important book for us to discuss because it plays also into the current global geopositioning of different countries, including the United States, United Kingdom. Africa needs food, and we can grow our own food, but it seems there's a problem of hunger, and we're going to try and find out why. So, Elliot, do you want to go through chapters 1 to 3, please?
Yes. Firstly, I think chapter 1, I introduced the subject, which is sustainable development and climate change. It's sort of an exploration of the entire subject of climate change, bringing in also critically the various debates as reflected by UN summits. So I looked at the summit in Rio de Janeiro of 1992. We also looked at subsequent summits, including the Joburg of 2002. But also high on the agenda was to say, okay, fine, where are we now? Given that after every 4 years, the United Nations sort of calls in for a summit where all the countries of the world meet, review the current endeavors of auditing on global warming, auditing also on including the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, that were up to 2015. And then we also looked at the leading to the SDGs, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. So yes, and the last chapter 3 and 2, we're mostly looking at the population explosion. That as we look at 2025, when the population will be 8.5 billion, given that the food security currently facing governments and also the UN, that millions of people go hungry every day. Will the world be ready to be able to extend or to meet the food security of 1.5 billion extra mouths coming by 2025? So yes, those were certain challenges and the critical analysis that we looked at. We also looked at the competition between energy and food security, with the view that yes, the world have embraced biofuel. We've seen countries like Brazil and the United States of America also growing maize to convert into biofuel, and thereby competing with the food, with the human consumption. So yes, we looked at that as well. And we also reflected on the debate currently in the United States, given that we now have got a new president, Donald Trump, who believes that global warming is a myth. And so yes, the challenge is as to what to now be the case, the challenges for United Nations. Yes, in summary, that's what we've covered. And over to you, Derek.
Okay, thank you, Elliot, for that brief but very important summary. So today you in this chapter 4, you look at agriculture and food security, the responsibility for climate change and sustainable development. Okay, and I think there are a lot of scientific words in that title. Would you care to briefly explain? I think people will understand agriculture, but what is the link between agriculture, food security, climate change, and sustainable development?
Yes, there's a correlation between food security and sustainable development. I'm going to define that correlation, or to sort of make it clear. Now, food security. When we look at the food security, we look at the food production globally, and we know there's now a sort of supply chain. Although most of the food stuff, let's give an example for the Western world, for example. Within here, for example, in UK, you get almost all food stuffs from all continents. Now, the food that is being imported into the Western world from the developing world is, yes, produced in developing world, but also the challenges that we have is that the very people who are producing the food cannot afford to buy the same food that they're producing. That's one challenge that is also in this chapter. Now, why are we interested in sustainability? Because the human wants are sort of infinite. Yes, in terms of needs against the wants. If you look at the basic needs, food is a basic needs where every individual has got the right to access to food. Mm-hmm. But however, we've got other nations that also have got unfettered wants, extra food. And some of the countries like UK, where 25% of the food stuff purchased is thrown in the bin all the time. And we are saying, is it sustainable, the current situation that we have in terms of population growth against the current level of food production? Is it sustainable?
Not only food production, but also the distribution of the food. Because we might even, if we're throwing away more than 25%, I think the figure is close to 33%. Of the food which is bought in the UK is actually thrown in the bin, either because the food actually expires in people's homes and they end up throwing the food away, or if it's cabbages that they've bought, they might go bad and they might peel off the bad parts. But if you add up all the food that is lost, it's more than 33%. Now, so it's not just a problem of the availability or the production of the food, but the distribution of the current food production levels, which I suspect may just be enough, but because we're not distributing it equitably, that's where we have a problem.
Yeah, and then looking at the climate change and how do we bring in climate change? Yes, we know climate change is a source of global warming. Here, what we are saying, we are talking about sustained increase of temperatures being caused by human action. Human action here, we are talking about pollution. As the world industrialized, you find culprits are the Western world themselves because of the industrialization. They put so much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that carbon dioxide has been seen over the years. Research has shown that it is damaging the ozone layer. And the ozone layer is actually the membrane that protects us on the Earth from UV light from the sun. And that also has got an influence in terms of rain patterns. I think we have seen globally the surge of natural disasters, cyclones, for example, which have caused either flooding, thereby destroying the agricultural sector, or in a way interfering in the food security or food availability itself. So yes, there's that link between the climate change, global warming, the availability of food, and distribution of food, and linked to that is the population growth, which policymakers need also to factor in when they are either planning for agricultural output.
Yeah.
And most of the countries, we know that it is a challenge, and especially developing countries in Africa, we have got an abundance of land, arable land, but because of toxic politics and ill governance, you find that our policymakers themselves have not coherently put policies that addresses the food security.
Yes, and then lastly, on the same point, we also have, for example, the Trump presidency. Trump is now the commander-in-chief in the United States, and his views on climate change or the causes of climate change are at variance with scientific evidence, in that he denies the link between human activities of burning greenhouse gases to the increase in carbon dioxide, which causes the warming of the earth, which then causes climate change. So I know the United Nations has tried to have all these summits to talk about the link between all of the four things we're talking about: agriculture, food security, sustainable development, and climate change. But when we have an influential politician like Donald Trump denying climate change, then we can see how it's going to affect both food security and sustainable development. Because if he reduces funding, and some of the funding is coming from the American government, and also the fact that he has instructed the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency in America, to stop the, I think, monthly or some regular updates or reports that they give on how much carbon emissions they are emitting into the atmosphere. So we see that political leadership at a global scale can affect all of these things we're talking about.
Indeed, yes. I think it's worrying given the situation that since 1992, the Rio de Janeiro summit in Brazil, the world has moved forward, I would say, immensely in terms of putting infrastructure in place and harnessing the technology to ensure that we've got clean energy that is friendly to the environment, and also trying to depart from the use of dirty energy like thermal power, for example. And yes, and I think as lately as in 2015, we had the Paris P20, where global leaders met in Paris, and including the President of the United States, then Barack Obama, who actually committed to specific quotas to stop or mitigate global warming. And less than 12 months, we now got a new president in the United States of America, and the same person is tearing apart the treaties that have been signed in saving the world, in saving the globe. And I think it is a challenge. And I think yes, although he is president of the United States, and he is purportedly doing it, with American interest at heart, I think the whole world should make the necessary noise with the United Nations. Yes. That we cannot allow one president of the nature of Donald Trump to derail the whole effort that the whole world has put in place to save the world and to save us from the calamities. We talked about natural disasters, the cyclones, for example. We've talked about food security itself. And global warming is not a myth, like what Donald Trump is trying to say. It is a reality. You just need to go within each country. If you look at the temperatures within cities and temperatures in rural areas, they've got variations because of building infrastructure within those cities, because of industrialization and the emissions coming from many actions within cities. A good example is, for example, here in the UK, London always will have temperatures above average than the entire of UK, because of it is home to over 20 million people, heavily built, a lot of emissions in terms of vehicle, industries, etc. All that have added to the variations in weather patterns and temperatures, even at a micro level. So it is a reality, and you don't need even to travel further to find evidence that global warming is man-made.
Right.
So we need to make sure that United States as a leader of a free world, as a superpower, is forced to accept that they cannot have the cake and eat it.
Thank you, Elliot. I wanted to zero in a little bit on agriculture. In your book, you state all of the things that agriculture is involved in, including livestock, cereals, fisheries, biofuel, grain production, and a few more. But you also say that the drivers for all of these things is land, water, and optimum temperature. So in terms of the land and in terms of the water, which I think in India there's a problem already with water, and also in terms of optimum temperatures, how does agriculture then impact on climate change in specific?
Yeah, I think the type, for example, in terms of chemicals, yes, of course, as we become so much mechanized in our agricultural production, you find that we are using more and more chemicals. And some of the chemicals that we are using, they've got a profound effect to weather patterns as well. And this is why there's always research on trying to come up with the best types of fertilizers or chemicals that we can use that are also friendly to both to the ecosystem, because I think we have to talk about the ecosystem in the sense of could be flora, fauna, and any organisms that actually depend on land or on a balanced type of ecosystem. So yes, there's a correlation in that. In terms of agriculture, we have seen that some countries, they still use traditional means of agro approach, whereby deforestation, because they are not heavily mechanized, they clear so much land for very little yields of production.
Yeah.
And as such, by destroying forests, some countries, we've seen actually desert encroaching. We've actually seen that they've also influenced in a way the rainfall pattern.
Yeah.
So yes, there is that correlation between the agricultural system that we are practicing, and also in terms of the effect to rainforest, effect to ecosystem, and the climate change as well.
Right. So how do we make agriculture sustainable? In your book, you state that sustainable agricultural production requires deployment of technology to maximize outputs with minimum damage to the environment.
Yes. So it's like, for example, I was talking about mechanization.
Yeah.
So the best way to, and also I would like to link that to the increase in population. As we go to 2025, where we are going to have 8.5 billion. So we are adding 1.5 billion more people.
Yeah.
So there are two ways to ensure food security. One way would be to increase the hectareage for food production.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other way is that we can, in which case it means we are clearing more forests.
Which means we are encroaching into the ecosystem of the other organisms.
Yes. So we are unsettling the ecosystem in terms of animals, in terms of other organisms that actually support life. Okay? Which is what we don't want to do. The other way of doing it would be to maximize on the land that we are already producing on, using technology, mechanization, instead of using traditional means of producing, whereby you're using cow-drawn plows, just hoes, traditional hoes. We are then deploying technology. We are deploying combined harvesters, tractors, any technology that actually improves production per hectare.
Yeah.
Okay? So in this book, what I was saying is the challenges that we have is that because land is not an infinite resource. It's a finite resource. We cannot create land. We can only maximize the use of the land that we already have. Yet the population is increasing all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Zimbabwe's population at independence, it was 7 million people, right? At the moment, we are talking about maybe 18 million as we go to 2020.
Yeah.
Right? Now, look at the disparity. So it's about, since 1980, we've added about 11 million people, right? But we've not created a new landmass. Okay? It's still the same land that we're talking about. Right? So all what we need is to make sure that we maximize the use of the same land. And the only way to do it is to mechanize it.
Okay. Can you talk about the disparity between the African continent as one of the, or can I say, the main producer of most of the food which is consumed around the world, and the poverty which is bedeviling the continent in terms of lack of access to clean, to safe drinking water and just simple sanitation?
Yeah, I think the challenges that we have is Africa has got so much arable land that it is capable of not only feeding its own people in Africa, but feeding the entire world. And in a way, in our small way already, we are feeding the entire world. The why I'm saying so is that you find most of the food that is being exported to the developed world is being produced from developing world. And when we talk about developing world, we are also talking about Africa, India, and the other Asian countries. But Africa comes first, especially in terms of export to European Union. But what you are saying is, how come that the very countries that export to the Western world can't even feed their own citizens? There are two challenges to that. The other challenge is that I blame the governments in Africa, whereby they don't have coherent policies that actually make sure that within those policies they ring fence their own food security for their own people, subsidizing them sometimes where they cannot afford the food because of production costs. We know that when the moment we talk about mechanization, yes, there's a cost into it, but mass production means the prices will be driven down, and then at the end of the day it becomes affordable.
Yeah.
The other problem that we have is that the estates, farms in Africa, the big estates are actually owned by conglomerates. These conglomerates are actually owned by Western world. So the food is actually produced on contract.
Yeah.
Before it's even harvested, it is already been bought, irrespective of the fact that there is famine in that country and that there is not enough food in that country. And our governments do not have any policies whereby they are in control of such government, such production or such companies. And I think this is what we need to address as a continent.
Do you think the African Union
within Africa that there's no coordination in Africa? We are not coordinated.
Yeah.
We could be a very force to reckon with if Africa itself can even trade within its own member states, which is lacking. For your information, Africa trade with itself only 30% of its production.
Yeah.
And 70% is actually exported to totally outside Africa. Yet Africa is home to about 1 billion people. We have a market.
You're right. I think we can tie that up with the Zimbabwe as a case study. If you can comment, I know we've commented on this before, but on the land redistribution exercise. And the main question I want to actually ask on Zimbabwe is, why do we depend on natural rains for agriculture? Yet we don't depend, for example, on solar. We could be dependent on solar for energy, but we are not dependent on solar for some strange reason. But we want to depend on rains. If there are good rains, people are jubilant that we've had good rains, so we're going to have a lot of food. So
I think we find our challenges in Zimbabwe is that the dams that we have were actually constructed before independence, and as a government, as a people's government, the ZANU-PF has misplaced the priorities. We would have expected that by now, instead of just letting the water run into the ocean, we would have built in dams to harvest that water.
But one of the things I've been hearing, and it's funny to hear that, is that even though the dams are full, the excuse now is that we don't have the chemicals to process the water. So we still have a water problem, it seems.
Yeah, but look at it. And if you ask them how much are the chemicals, right? Those are trivial figures compared with the 15 billion that the president says is missing from his coffers. Right? All I'm saying is that we have got to misplace priorities. Misplaced priorities by the government itself through corruption. And for your information, all members of the cabinet, they are multi-millionaires themselves, right?
Yeah.
And you don't need a multi-million order for that chemicals that we are talking about.
Yeah.
Cheap chemicals, chlorine chemicals, So yes, we've got. Of course, we know there's financial crisis in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Because of the type of economy that we are running. But that is nothing to do with the inability of Zimbabwe as a country without resources. We have got
Elliot,
all the necessary resources. We actually are a jewel of Africa.
Yeah.
We can actually support the entire Southern Africa, if not the entire corridor from Cape to Cape.
So,
but the problem is that we don't have the government.
How do you think we have handled climate change and sustainable development and food security and agriculture in terms of the land redistribution? How have we managed those four things we're talking about today after acquiring the land?
I think it's pathetic, the current situation in Zimbabwe. Yes, of course, I think since 1980, we accepted that there were 2,500 white farmers who actually owned almost 3/4 of prime land in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
We accept that. And we accept that needed to be addressed. We accepted that. But those were 2,500 white farmers controlling 3/4 of arable land. But what do we have at the moment is even a worse scenario. Now those 2,500, prime farms, they were now parceled to less than 1,000 connected people within ZANU-PF. So we've actually made the situation worse. So that 3/4 of prime land is now being owned by very few people. And worse still, these are the people who had no experience, no prior training, no induction process of how they can utilize the land. And this is why at the end of the day, for the same land, Zimbabwe cannot feed itself. Yet for the same land, before 1980, the same land was able to produce enough for the entire country, export to Africa, export to the entire world.
Yeah.
So what we have is very shambolic. It's not a land redistribution at all. Because if you are going to do a land redistribution, you properly distribute it, empowering the very people that you're giving the land. Right. And in this case, that was not the case. So the problem with the land still is an unfinished business. It was an unfinished business during the white colonial rule. It is still an unfinished business because you cannot have a situation whereby 3/4 of the entire landmass in a country is owned by a political party.
Yes, there's a question for you, Elliot.
Yes.
Elliot, where do you get those figures? It's from one of my viewers on Facebook. Thank you for the question, Douglas.
Yes, my figures. It's a good question. Yeah. Well, this is my area of expertise. So I read quite a lot, of course. I've researched quite a lot in terms of sustainable development, climate change, in terms of course, Zimbabwe being, as a politician, I don't believe that you only talk politics of sloganeering without putting specific figures on how you want to address the situation. You need to understand the quantitative, the empirical evidence of what is it exactly you are trying to change.
I think it is disputing the 1,000 people.
Knowledge of the area and research.
He's not disputing as such, but he's surprised that 1,000 people would take over 2,000, was it 2,500?
2,500,
yeah. So he said that would be, if true, that's Western colonization.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, this is why we are saying that is even a worse scenario. Yeah. We now got a few people, controlling 3/4 of prime land.
Right. Let's move on to fair trade. According to Caroline S. 1996, ethical consumerism refers to buyer behavior that reflects a concern with the problems of the third world, where producers are paid low wages and live in poor conditions simply to produce cheap products for Western consumers and businesses. I forgot to bring. I was reading my box of tea leaves in the kitchen, and there's a message. One of the messages on the box is the fact that that company is practicing ethical consumerism, or in other words, it's practicing fair trade, and it's looking after. It has made sure that the children of the growers, and the growers themselves, are paid fair wages, and their children they've built schools for the children in that area, so they are making sure that the children can also go to school. Now, what is your comment on that?
I think look at it. Yes, we've got a new breed of consumers who are very knowledgeable of what is going on in the world, and especially after
second, Elliot. Thank you. It says, I like you that you agreed with the land question. That's the latest comment from our viewer.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. What was the comment?
That he is happy you agreed with the land question.
Okay, good. Yeah. So yes, what I was saying here is that the new breed of consumers, they know what they want, and I think after having experienced these cases whereby the big companies are also using child labor, abusing child labor, and paying sometimes virtually peanuts for producing branded goods, which all these branded goods ended up in the Western world and enriching the West at the expense of the developing world. And I think, yes, today's consumers, we are very sensitive as to where exactly these products that we are consuming are coming from, and whether those companies have paid their fair share of it.
I remember once
the fair trade brand. Yes, it's a welcome gesture, and I think I also alluded to it in my book.
Yeah.
But it's not enough to put a logo on a product, and I think we also need to take audit of whether does it really reflect what is happening on the ground.
Yeah, is it really happening?
I think this is where the problem is. It's like corporate social responsibility, where every company will tell you that they are corporate social responsibility compliant.
Yeah, and they'll have that on their website.
The ground, to do a proper audit, you find that there is nothing on the ground to show that they are behaving ethically. It's like teenager sex, where everybody is talking about it, but nobody is doing it.
Yeah, I remember one incident where the new Minister of Industry at the time, I think it's Mike Beamer, almost got stuck in a big pothole while traveling to Marange. And he was surprised that with all that money which has been coming out of all the diamonds from Marange, the roads have not been serviced.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But you can see the type, the mental state of our politicians, that misplaced priorities, I've always been saying. That those things, to you and me, it's common sense, isn't it? Right. If you've got resources, you've got diamond mines, then the diamond mines, the proceeds must also benefit the community in a way. And road network should be a priority, because they use the same roads, right, to transport their goods, to transport spot the diamonds, right?
Yeah.
And it's the directors, they drive in and out. They know that the roads are impassable. They actually try to negotiate, potholes. Whilst they are stashing millions and millions of pounds.
I think one businessman actually boasted that now he has bought a car which can go around potholes like this because it's such a a big car.
Yeah. But then you say, why don't you just just repair the pothole?
Yeah.
With the very money in your boot. And mind you, the money in the boot will be more than the cost of the pothole.
Yes, Douglas says we lack a growth mindset. Well said. So thank you, Douglas. Yes. So I think we're coming to the end of today's talk. We've been talking about, we've been looking at chapter 4 of Elliot's book on social justice and food security. And chapter 4 is agriculture and food security, a responsibility for climate change and sustainable development. Okay? So I think we need sustainable development in many areas, including mining, as we've just seen. So it's not just in agriculture and food security, but it's in mining and it's everything else within the country. We should treat the country as an ecosystem of things that need to be done by not just looking at one thing, but by looking at everything.
Yeah.
And also looking at
from a holistic
approach, and also to look at the global impact of what we're doing locally, and the local impact of global decisions which may be made by people like Donald Trump, for example. So
we need to think globally and act locally.
Act locally and think globally. Thank you. And thank you to Douglas for your comments, which we have tried to include in our discussion with Elliot today. Elliot, any closing statement?
Now, I just want to thank our viewers, and I also want to apologize that we didn't air a session last Sunday. We thought of giving it a special Mother's Day to all our mothers and children.
And happy Mother's Day belated to all our mothers.
So yes,
and wives.
So we'll continue every Sunday as usual, and we value your presence, and please keep sending your questions. Could be comments or further information that you want us to articulate or to discuss. Please feel free, and this program is your program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.